In the depths of the Egyptian desert, beneath tons of sand and stone, lies a civilization that ruled for over 3,000 years. Tonight, we'll uncover the complete story of ancient Egypt, from the first pharaohs to Cleopatra's final breath. Let the sands of time carry you into peaceful sleep as we journey through dynasties, gods, and mysteries that still captivate the world today. Our story begins along the life-giving waters of the Nile River. Around 6000 BCE, small groups of people settled along its banks, drawn by the fertile soil left behind after each annual flood. These early inhabitants learned to predict the river's cycles, developing the foundations of what would become one of history's greatest civilizations. The Nile was everything to ancient Egypt. It flowed from south to north, creating a narrow green valley through the vast Sahara Desert. The Egyptians divided their land into two regions, Upper Egypt in the south and Lower Egypt in the north. This might seem backwards, but it made perfect sense to them. The Nile flows downhill from the highlands of Africa to the Mediterranean Sea. By 4000 BCE, these early Egyptians had developed sophisticated farming techniques. They learned to channel the Nile's floodwaters into irrigation canals, allowing them to grow wheat, barley, and flax. Even in the desert, villages grew into towns, and towns developed their own rulers and gods. In Upper Egypt, the most powerful center was Hierakonpolis. Archaeological evidence shows us elaborate burials here, with bodies surrounded by pottery, jewelry, and weapons. These graves tell us that Egyptian society was already becoming stratified, with clear differences between rulers and common people. Lower Egypt had its own centers of power, particularly around the Nile Delta. The symbol of Lower Egypt was the red crown, while Upper Egypt used the white crown. These two regions often fought for control, but they also traded with each other, sharing ideas and technologies. Around 3500 BCE, we see the emergence of what archaeologists call the Gurza culture. These people created beautiful pottery, decorated with boats, animals, and human figures. They worked with copper and gold, creating tools and jewelry of remarkable craftsmanship. Most importantly, they began using hieroglyphs, the picture-writing system that would become one of Egypt's most famous achievements. The Gurza people built increasingly large settlements. They constructed elaborate temples and developed more complex burial practices. The idea that death was not an ending, but a transformation to another life, was already taking root in Egyptian culture. The Unification of Egypt. Around 3100 BCE, a king from Upper Egypt named Narmer accomplished what no ruler had done before. He conquered Lower Egypt and united the entire Nile Valley under his rule. This unification marks the beginning of Dynastic Egypt and the start of one of the longest-lasting civilizations in human history. Narmer's victory is recorded on a ceremonial palette discovered by archaeologists. On one side, we see the king wearing the white crown of Upper Egypt, striking down an enemy. On the other side, he wears the red crown of Lower Egypt, inspecting rows of decapitated enemies. This palette tells us that the unification was not peaceful. It was achieved through warfare and conquest. With unification came the concept of the pharaoh as a divine ruler. Narmer was not just a king, but a living god on earth. He was the earthly embodiment of Horus, the sky god depicted as a falcon. This divine kingship would remain a central belief throughout Egyptian history. The newly unified kingdom established its capital at Memphis, strategically located where Upper and Lower Egypt met. From here, the pharaoh could control both regions and the vital trade routes that connected them. The early dynastic period encompasses the first two dynasties of unified Egypt. These were times of consolidation, when the pharaohs worked to solidify their control over the entire country and establish the institutions that would define Egyptian civilization. Dynasty I began with Narmer, also known as Menes in some records. He and his successors faced the challenge of governing a country that stretched over 600 miles along the Nile. They developed a sophisticated bureaucracy, with officials responsible for taxation, justice, and public works. The pharaohs of Dynasty I were buried at Abydos, in elaborate underground tombs surrounded by smaller burials. These subsidiary graves contained servants who were killed to accompany their master into the afterlife. This practice shows us how seriously the Egyptians took their beliefs about death and the afterlife. Writing became increasingly important during this period. Hieroglyphs were used not just for religious purposes, but for record-keeping, laws, and administrative documents. Scribes became a powerful class in Egyptian society, as literacy was rare and valuable. Dynasty II saw further developments in Egyptian culture and religion. The pharaohs of this dynasty were buried at Saqqara, near Memphis, in increasingly elaborate tombs. The stepped pyramid form was beginning to emerge in Egyptian architecture. Religious beliefs became more complex during the early dynastic period. The Egyptians worshipped hundreds of gods and goddesses, each with their own roles and powers. Ra, the sun god, was becoming increasingly important. Ptah, the creator god of Memphis, was patron of craftsmen and artists. Thoth, depicted as an ibis bird, was the god of wisdom and writing. The concept of Ma'at, truth, justice, and cosmic order, was central to Egyptian thought. The pharaoh was responsible for maintaining Ma'at throughout the kingdom. This meant ensuring justice in the courts, proper religious observances, and the proper functioning of society. The Old Kingdom, the Pyramid Age. The Old Kingdom represents the first great flowering of Egyptian civilization. This was the Pyramid Age, when the pharaohs built monuments that still amaze us today. It was a time of stability, prosperity, and artistic achievement that established many of the characteristics we associate with ancient Egypt. The Old Kingdom began with Dynasty III and the pharaoh Djoser. Djoser's reign marked a revolution in Egyptian architecture and royal burial practices. His vizier Imhotep designed and built the first monumental stone building in history, the Step Pyramid at Saqqara. The Step Pyramid was unlike anything built before. Instead of mud brick, it was constructed entirely of stone. Instead of a flat mastaba tomb, it rose in 6 distinct steps toward the sky. Standing 200 feet tall, it dominated the landscape and could be seen for miles in every direction. Imhotep was more than just an architect. He was a physician, astronomer, and scholar who was later deified by the Egyptians. His step pyramid complex included temples, courtyards, and underground chambers filled with provisions for the pharaoh's afterlife journey. Dynasty IV brought us the most famous pharaohs of the Old Kingdom, Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure, the builders of the Great Pyramids at Giza. These monuments represent the pinnacle of pyramid building and the height of royal power during the Old Kingdom. Khufu's Great Pyramid was the largest building in the world for over 3,800 years. It contains approximately 2.3 million stone blocks, each weighing between 2.5 and 15 tons. The precision of its construction is remarkable. The base is level to within just 2.1 centimeters. Building the pyramids required enormous resources and organization. Tens of thousands of workers were needed, along with massive amounts of food, tools, and materials. Recent archaeological evidence suggests that the pyramid builders were not slaves, as often depicted in popular culture, but paid workers who lived in purpose-built villages near the construction sites. The pyramid complexes were not just tombs, but elaborate religious centers designed to ensure the pharaoh's successful journey to the afterlife. Each pyramid had an associated mortuary temple where priests performed daily rituals to sustain the dead king's spirit. Dynasty V saw changes in royal burial practices and religious beliefs. The pyramids built during this dynasty were smaller and less well constructed than those at Giza, but they introduced an important innovation: pyramid texts. These are the oldest known religious writings in the world, carved into the walls of burial chambers. The pyramid texts contain spells and prayers designed to help the dead pharaoh navigate the dangers of the afterlife. They describe the pharaoh's journey to join Ra, the sun god, in his daily voyage across the sky. These texts provide our earliest detailed look at Egyptian beliefs about death and the afterlife. Dynasty VI marked the end of the Old Kingdom's golden age. The pharaohs of this dynasty ruled for long periods, but their power gradually weakened. Pepi II ruled for over 90 years, the longest reign in Egyptian history. However, by the end of his reign, the central government was losing control over the provinces. The First Intermediate Period. The collapse of the Old Kingdom led to a period of political fragmentation known as the First Intermediate Period. This was a time of civil war, famine, and social upheaval that contrasts sharply with the stability of the previous era. Several factors contributed to the Old Kingdom's collapse. Climate change led to a series of low Nile floods, causing widespread famine. The long reign of Pepi II may have led to a succession crisis. Most importantly, the provincial governors had grown increasingly powerful and independent. With the weakening of royal authority, Egypt broke apart into competing kingdoms. Dynasties of 7 and 8 tried to rule from Memphis, but their authority was limited. In Middle Egypt, the city of Heracleopolis became the center of Dynasties 9 and 10. Meanwhile, in Upper Egypt, the city of Thebes emerged as a rival power center. The Heracleopolitan pharaohs controlled Lower and Middle Egypt, including the vital Nile Delta. They maintained trade relationships with the Levant and Nubia, keeping some aspects of Egyptian civilization functioning. However, their control was often contested by local rulers who acted as independent kings. In Thebes, a family of local rulers gradually built up their power. They called themselves pharaohs and began reunifying Upper Egypt under their control. The most important of these Theban rulers was Intef II, who expanded Theban control northward and laid the groundwork for eventual reunification. The literature of this period reflects the social upheaval and uncertainty of the times. The Admonitions of Epawar describes a world turned upside down, where servants rule their masters and the poor have become rich. The Dialogue of a Man with His Soul explores themes of despair and the meaning of existence. Despite the political chaos, this period saw important developments in Egyptian culture. Local rulers competed with each other by patronizing arts and crafts, leading to regional artistic styles. The democratization of burial practices meant that non-royal individuals could now hope for a successful afterlife, spreading religious beliefs throughout society. The Middle Kingdom, Classical Egypt. The Middle Kingdom began when Mentuhotep II of Thebes finally defeated the Heracleopolitan rulers and reunified Egypt around 2055. This period is often called the Classical Age of Egyptian civilization, when literature, art, and architecture reached new heights of sophistication. Mentuhotep II established the 11th dynasty and made Thebes the capital of Egypt. His reunification was not easy. It took years of warfare to bring the entire country under Theban control. Once successful, he began the process of rebuilding Egyptian institutions and restoring the pharaoh's divine authority. The Middle Kingdom pharaohs learned from the Old Kingdom's collapse. Instead of concentrating all power in the capital, they created a more balanced system of government. Provincial officials were appointed by the pharaoh rather than inheriting their positions, ensuring greater loyalty to the central government. Dynasty 12, founded by Amenemhat I, represented the height of Middle Kingdom achievement. These pharaohs were great builders, administrators, and military leaders who expanded Egyptian influence and prosperity. Thanamevel and I moved the capital from Thebes to a new city called Itchatui, near Memphis. This location allowed better control of both Upper and Lower Egypt. He also established a co-regency system where the heir to the throne ruled alongside the pharaoh, ensuring smooth succession. Senusretai, Amenemhat's son and successor, was one of Egypt's greatest pharaohs. He launched military campaigns that expanded Egyptian control into Nubia, securing access to gold mines and trade routes. He also rebuilt temples throughout Egypt and established the first Egyptian colonies in Nubia. The Middle Kingdom saw the flourishing of Egyptian literature. The story of Sinuhe tells of an Egyptian official who flees to foreign lands after a political crisis, only to long for his homeland. The teaching of Amenemhat I presents the pharaoh's advice to his son about the burdens and loneliness of rule. Egyptian art during the Middle Kingdom combined the monumental scale of the Old Kingdom with greater realism and emotional expression. Sculptures of the pharaohs show them as careworn rulers, bearing the weight of responsibility rather than the idealized god-kings of earlier periods. The pharaohs of Dynasty 12 built pyramid complexes that rivaled those of the Old Kingdom, but with important differences. These pyramids were built with mud brick cores covered in limestone casing, making them less durable but more economical to construct. Amenemhat III, one of the last great pharaohs of Dynasty 12, ruled for 45 years and oversaw major irrigation projects in the Fayum region. These projects created new agricultural land and demonstrated the government's ability to organize massive public works projects. The Middle Kingdom also saw the expansion of trade relationships with other civilizations. Egyptian goods reached as far as Crete and Anatolia, while foreign luxury items appeared in Egyptian tombs. This international trade brought new ideas and technologies to Egypt. The Second Intermediate Period was another time of political fragmentation, but unlike the First Intermediate Period, this era was marked by foreign rule and cultural change. The most significant development was the conquest of Lower Egypt by the Hyksos, a Semitic people from the Levant. The collapse of the Middle Kingdom was gradual. Dynasty 13 pharaohs ruled from Thebes but had weak control over the provinces. The government became increasingly unstable, with short reigns and frequent changes of ruler. Around 1650 BCE, the Hyksos established their capital at Avaris in the eastern delta. The name Hyksos means rulers of foreign lands in Egyptian, but they were probably a mix of Asiatic peoples who had been settling in Egypt for generations. They adopted Egyptian royal titles and customs, but maintained their own cultural traditions. The Hyksos introduced several important innovations to Egypt. They brought horse-drawn chariots, composite bows, and bronze weaponry, military technologies that would transform Egyptian warfare. They also introduced new crops, musical instruments, and artistic styles. Meanwhile, in Upper Egypt, a native Egyptian dynasty, Dynasty 15, continued to rule from Thebes. Initially, the Theban pharaohs may have been vassals of the Hyksos, but over time, they began to assert their independence and plan the liberation of Egypt. The Theban pharaoh Kamose launched the first major campaign against the Hyksos around 1555 BCE. His war records, preserved on stelae at Karnak, describe battles against the foreign rulers and his determination to expel them from Egypt. Kamose's brother Ahmose completed the liberation of Egypt. He besieged and captured Avaris, driving the Hyksos from Egypt forever. He then pursued them into Palestine, ensuring they could not return. Ahmose's victory marked the beginning of the New Kingdom and established Dynasty 18. The New Kingdom, Imperial Egypt. The New Kingdom represents ancient Egypt at its most powerful and prosperous. This was the age of empire, when Egyptian pharaohs controlled territories from Nubia to the Euphrates River. It was the time of legendary rulers like Hatshepsut, Akhenaten, Tutankhamun, and Ramesses the Great. Ahmose I, founder of Dynasty 18, did more than simply expel the Hyksos. He fundamentally transformed Egypt into a militaristic state capable of defending itself and expanding its borders. He reorganized the army, introducing the military technologies learned from the Hyksos, and established a professional officer class. Under Ahmose's successors, Egypt began its imperial expansion. Amenhotep I secured Egypt's southern border by conquering Nubia up to the Third Cataract. This conquest gave Egypt access to Nubian gold mines, which would fund the empire's expansion for centuries to come. Thutmose I was the first pharaoh to campaign in Asia. He led Egyptian armies across the Sinai Peninsula and into the Levant, establishing Egyptian control over Palestine and southern Syria. He even reached the Euphrates River, where he erected a stela, claiming this distant land for Egypt. The reign of Hatshepsut marked a unique period in Egyptian history. Originally the regent for her stepson Thutmose III, she eventually claimed the throne for herself and ruled as pharaoh for 22 years. Hatshepsut was one of the most successful female rulers in history, overseeing a period of peace, prosperity, and magnificent construction projects. Hatshepsut's mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahri is considered one of the masterpieces of ancient architecture. Built into the cliffs of the Valley of the Kings, It features terraced colonnades and relief sculptures depicting her divine birth and successful trading expeditions to the mysterious land of Punt. After Hatshepsut's death, Thutmose III became sole ruler and proved himself to be Egypt's greatest military pharaoh. He conducted 17 military campaigns in Asia, establishing Egyptian dominance over the Levant and creating a buffer zone against potential threats from Mesopotamia. Thutmose III's victory at the Battle of Megiddo in 1457 BCE was particularly significant. He defeated a coalition of Canaanite city-states and established the pattern of Egyptian imperial control in Asia. Rather than directly occupying conquered territories, Egypt typically allowed local rulers to remain in power as vassals, paying tribute and providing troops when needed. The wealth flowing into Egypt from its empire funded unprecedented building projects. Temple complexes at Karnak and Luxor were expanded and beautified. The pharaohs were buried in elaborate rock-cut tombs in the Valley of the Kings, decorated with intricate paintings depicting their journey through the afterlife. Amenhotep III ruled during the height of Egypt's power and prosperity. His 38-year reign was marked by diplomatic marriages with foreign princesses, massive construction projects, and the patronage of arts and literature. Egypt, during his reign, was the wealthiest and most powerful nation in the known world. The Amarna letters, discovered in the 19th century, provide fascinating insights into the international diplomacy of this period. These cuneiform tablets contain correspondence between Egyptian pharaohs and rulers of Babylon, Assyria, Mitanni, and other powers, revealing a complex web of alliances, marriages, and trade relationships. The Amarna period, religious revolution. The reign of Akhenaten marked one of the most dramatic periods in Egyptian history. Originally named Amenhotep IV, this pharaoh launched a religious revolution that temporarily transformed Egyptian civilization and challenged traditions that had endured for over 1,000 years. Akhenaten promoted the worship of Aten, the solar disk, as the sole god of Egypt. This was revolutionary in a culture that had worshipped hundreds of deities for millennia. The pharaoh changed his name to Akhenaten, meaning beneficial to the Aten, and moved the capital from Thebes to a new city called Akhetaten, modern Amarna. The new capital was built from scratch in the desert of Middle Egypt. It featured palaces, temples, and administrative buildings designed according to Akhenaten's religious vision. The city's art broke dramatically with Egyptian traditions, showing the royal family in informal, intimate scenes that would have been unthinkable in earlier periods. Akhenaten's queen was the famous Nefertiti, whose bust is one of the most recognizable artifacts from ancient Egypt. She played an unusually prominent role in the religious revolution, appearing alongside her husband in temple reliefs and even performing religious ceremonies typically reserved for pharaohs. The Amarna art style was revolutionary. Instead of the idealized formal representations of earlier periods, artists created more naturalistic images. The royal family was shown with elongated heads, protruding bellies, and feminine hips, features that may have reflected Akhenaten's actual appearance or been symbolic of his religious beliefs. The religious revolution had profound effects on Egyptian society. The traditional priesthood, especially the powerful priests of Amun at Thebes, lost their influence and wealth. Temples throughout Egypt were closed or converted to Aten worship. Traditional festivals and religious practices were abandoned or transformed. However, Akhenaten's revolution did not long survive his death around 1336 BCE. His immediate successors began the process of restoration, abandoning Akhetaten and returning to traditional religious practices. The pharaoh Tutankhamun, originally named Tutankhaten, changed his name to honor Amun and moved the capital back to Memphis. Tutankhamun and the restoration. Tutankhamun became pharaoh at approximately age 9 and died around age 18. His short reign would be historically insignificant, except for one crucial fact. His tomb was discovered nearly intact in 1922, providing us with the most complete picture of royal burial practices in ancient Egypt. The young pharaoh's reign was dominated by his advisors, who worked to restore traditional Egyptian religion and culture after the disruptions of the Amarna period. Temples were rebuilt, traditional festivals resumed, and the worship of Amun was restored to its former prominence. Tutankhamun's tomb in the Valley of the Kings contained over 5,000 objects, including his famous golden mask, jewelry, weapons, furniture, and even board games for entertainment in the afterlife. These treasures reveal the incredible wealth and craftsmanship available to Egyptian pharaohs during the New Kingdom. The discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb by Howard Carter created a worldwide sensation and sparked renewed interest in ancient Egypt. The treasures toured the world in exhibitions that attracted millions of visitors, making Tutankhamun perhaps the most famous pharaoh in popular culture. After Tutankhamun's early death, the throne passed briefly to Ai, an elderly courtier, and then to Horemheb, a military commander who had no royal blood. Horemheb worked systematically to erase all traces of the Amarna period, destroying monuments and inscriptions associated with Akhenaten and his successors. Dynasty 19, the Ramesside period. Dynasty 19, founded by Ramesses I, marked the beginning of the Ramesside period, named after the succession of pharaohs called Ramesses who dominated this era. This was a time of military conflict, monumental building projects, and the last great flowering of Egyptian imperial power. Seti I, son of Ramesses I, worked to restore Egypt's empire in Asia, which had been neglected during the later Amarna period and the reigns of Tutankhamun's successors. He campaigned successfully in Palestine and Syria, reasserting Egyptian control over these valuable territories. Seti I was also a great builder, constructing beautiful temples at Karnak and Abydos. His tomb in the Valley of the Kings is the longest and most elaborately decorated in the royal necropolis, featuring intricate astronomical texts and scenes from the Egyptian books of the afterlife. Ramesses II, known as Ramesses the Great, ruled for 66 years and left his mark on Egypt like no pharaoh before or after. He was a prolific builder, a successful military commander, and a master of royal propaganda who presented himself as the greatest pharaoh in Egyptian history. The Battle of Kadesh in 1274 BCE was the defining moment of Ramesses II's military career. He fought the Hittite army led by King Muwatalli II in what may have been the largest chariot battle in history. The battle ended in a stalemate, but Ramesses proclaimed it a great victory and had the story carved on temple walls throughout Egypt. Despite his propaganda, Ramesses II was actually a pragmatic ruler who recognized the benefits of peace. In 1259 BCE, he signed the world's first known peace treaty with the Hittites. This agreement established the border between the two empires and created an alliance that lasted for the rest of both civilizations. Ramesses II's building projects were magnificent in scale. He constructed two massive temples at Abu Simbel in Nubia, carved directly into cliff faces overlooking the Nile. The larger temple features 4 colossal seated statues of the pharaoh, each 65 feet tall, that dominated the landscape and impressed all who traveled the river. The pharaoh also built extensively in the Nile Delta, establishing a new capital city called Pi-Ramesses. This city served as the base for military campaigns in Asia and demonstrated Egyptian power to foreign visitors and ambassadors. Ramesses II had over 100 children with his various wives and concubines. He lived so long that he outlived many of his sons, and the throne eventually passed to his 13th son, Merneptah. The pharaoh's longevity created succession problems that would plague Dynasty 9. Merneptah faced invasions by the Sea Peoples, mysterious groups who attacked civilizations throughout the eastern Mediterranean around 1200 BCE. He successfully defended Egypt against these invaders, but the attacks contributed to the collapse of the Hittite Empire and the decline of Egyptian power in Asia. Dynasty doth end, and the late New Kingdom. Dynasty doth end was founded by Setnakha, who seized power during a period of civil war and confusion. His son Ramesses III was the last truly great pharaoh of the New Kingdom, successfully defending Egypt against multiple invasions and maintaining the empire's strength for 3 decades. Ramesses III faced 3 major waves of invasion by the Sea Peoples. These attackers came by both land and sea, destroying civilizations throughout the Mediterranean. The pharaoh's victory over these invaders recorded in reliefs at his mortuary temple at Medinet Habu, represents one of the great military achievements in Egyptian history. Despite his military successes, Ramesses III faced increasing internal problems. The cost of defending the empire strained Egypt's resources, and there were strikes by royal tomb builders demanding back pay. The pharaoh himself was assassinated in a harem conspiracy, though the plot was discovered and the conspirators were executed. The later pharaohs of Dynasty Duthan, all named Ramesses, ruled over a steadily declining empire. Egypt gradually lost control of its Asian territories, and Nubia became increasingly independent. The power of the high priests of Amun at Thebes grew until they rivaled the pharaohs themselves. By the end of Dynasty Tuent, Egypt was effectively divided. The pharaohs controlled Lower Egypt from the Delta, while the high priests of Amun ruled Upper Egypt from Thebes. This division marked the end of the New Kingdom and the beginning of Egypt's long decline as a world power. The Third Intermediate Period. The Third Intermediate Period saw Egypt divided among competing rulers and repeatedly invaded by foreign powers. This was a time of political fragmentation, cultural change, and the gradual eclipse of Egypt as a major power in the ancient world. Dynasty 21 began with Smendes, who ruled Lower Egypt from Tanis, while the high priests of Amun controlled Upper Egypt from Thebes. This division weakened Egypt and made it vulnerable to foreign influence and invasion. The most significant development of this period was the rise of Libyan influence in Egypt. Libyan chieftains who had settled in the Delta gradually gained power, eventually establishing Dynasty II under Sheshonq I around 945 BCE. The Libyan pharaohs adopted Egyptian culture and religion, but maintained their tribal organization and military traditions. They ruled from Tanis and Bubastis, but their control over Upper Egypt was often tenuous. Sheshan I was the most successful of the Libyan pharaohs. He reunified much of Egypt under his rule and even launched a successful campaign into Palestine, sacking Jerusalem during the reign of King Rehoboam. This campaign is recorded in the Bible as well as on the walls of the temple at Karnak. However, the Libyan dynasties could not maintain unity for long. Egypt fragmented into numerous small kingdoms ruled by local chiefs and princes. This period, sometimes called the Libyan Anarchy, saw Egypt at its weakest point in centuries. In the south, a new power was rising. The Kingdom of Kush, centered at Napata near the fourth cataract of the Nile, had adopted Egyptian culture and religion so completely that the Kushite rulers saw themselves as the true heirs of the pharaohs. Around 750 BCE, the Kushite king Kashta began the conquest of Upper Egypt. His successors, Paiti and Shabaka, completed the conquest of Egypt, establishing dynasty. The Kushite pharaohs were deeply religious and worked to restore traditional Egyptian culture and religion. They rebuilt temples, renewed religious festivals, and presented themselves as the legitimate pharaohs of Egypt. In many ways, they were more Egyptian than the Egyptians themselves. However, the Kushite Empire faced a formidable enemy to the north. The Assyrian Empire, at the height of its power, viewed Egyptian influence in Palestine as a threat to their control of the Levant. The Assyrian invasions and late period. The late period began with the Assyrian conquest of Egypt, marking the first time in over 1,000 years that Egypt was ruled by a foreign power. This period saw brief revivals of Egyptian independence alternating with foreign domination, culminating in the conquest by Alexander the Great. The Assyrian invasions began under Esarhaddon in 650 FR. The Assyrians possessed superior iron weapons and military organization, and they systematically conquered Lower Egypt. The Kushite pharaoh Taharka retreated to Upper Egypt but continued to resist. Ashurbanipal completed the Assyrian conquest in 663 BCE, sacking Thebes and ending Kushite rule in Egypt. However, the Assyrians found Egypt difficult to control from their distant homeland and preferred to rule through local vassals. Samtik-An, a prince of Sais in the Delta, gradually unified Egypt under his rule with Assyrian support. However, as Assyrian power weakened, he declared independence and founded Dynasty VI. The Saite pharaohs consciously modeled themselves on the great pharaohs of the Old Kingdom. They revived ancient artistic styles, copied old texts, and rebuilt temples in the classical Egyptian manner. This cultural renaissance is sometimes called the Site Renaissance. Psamtik. I ruled for 54 years and successfully restored Egyptian independence and prosperity. He hired Greek and Carian mercenaries to strengthen his army and encouraged Greek traders to settle in Egypt, beginning a period of increased cultural contact with the Mediterranean world. Necho II, son of Psamtik I, was an ambitious pharaoh who sought to restore Egypt's empire in Asia. He defeated and killed King Josiah of Judah at the Battle of Megiddo in 609 BCE, but was eventually defeated by the Babylonians at the Battle of Carchemish in 605 BC. Necho II also sponsored the first circumnavigation of Africa. According to Herodotus, Phoenician sailors in Egyptian service sailed from the Red Sea around the southern tip of Africa and returned through the Mediterranean, a voyage that took 3 years to complete. The Side period ended in 525 BCE when Cambyses the Suit of Persia conquered Egypt. The Persian conquest was facilitated by internal divisions in Egypt and the superior organization of the Persian Empire, which had recently conquered Babylon and inherited its claims to Egyptian territory. Persian rule and the final native dynasties. Persian rule in Egypt lasted for over 2 centuries, interrupted by brief periods of Egyptian independence. The Persians treated Egypt as a valuable province of their empire, exploiting its wealth while generally respecting Egyptian religious traditions. Cambyses II established Dynasty 7070, the first Persian period. Unlike later Persian rulers, Cambyses showed little respect for Egyptian religion, allegedly killing the sacred Apis bull at Memphis. His actions created lasting resentment among the Egyptian priesthood and people. Darius the Pic that took a more conciliatory approach toward Egyptian traditions. He completed the construction of several temples, codified Egyptian laws, and even had himself depicted in traditional pharaonic regalia. He also completed the canal connecting the Nile to the Red Sea, facilitating trade between Egypt and other parts of the Persian Empire. Despite Persian attempts at accommodation, Egyptian resentment remained strong. Several revolts occurred during the 5th century BCE, often supported by Greece, Persia's main rival in the Mediterranean. In 404 BCE, Amyrtaeus of Sais successfully expelled the Persians and established Dynasty Thou. This marked the beginning of the last native period, during which 3 dynasties of Egyptian pharaohs attempted to restore their country's independence and glory. Dynasty Thousand based in Mendes and Dynasty XXN based in Sebennytos were both relatively short-lived, but marked by extensive building projects and attempts to strengthen Egypt's military. The pharaohs of this period employed Greek mercenaries and formed alliances with Greece against Persia. Nectanebo I and Nectanebo II of Dynasty XLN were the last great native pharaohs of Egypt. They successfully resisted several Persian invasion attempts and initiated a cultural revival reminiscent of the Site period. However, in 343 BCE, Artaxerxes III finally reconquered Egypt, establishing the Second Persian period. This conquest was facilitated by the defection of Greek mercenaries in Egyptian service and internal divisions among the Egyptian leadership. The Second Persian period was harsh and oppressive. The Persians, perhaps frustrated by Egyptian resistance, showed little respect for local traditions and heavily taxed the country. This treatment made the Egyptians receptive to any liberator who might free them from Persian rule. That liberator came in the form of Alexander the Great. In 332 BCE, the young Macedonian king conquered Egypt with little resistance. The Egyptians, tired of Persian oppression, welcomed Alexander as a liberator rather than a conqueror. Alexander showed great respect for Egyptian religion and culture. He visited the Oracle of Ammon at the Siwa Oasis, where he was proclaimed the son of the god and legitimate pharaoh of Egypt. He also founded the city of Alexandria, which would become one of the greatest centers of learning and culture in the ancient world. Alexander's conquest marked the end of native Egyptian rule that had lasted for over 3,000 years. When Alexander died in 323 BCE, Egypt fell to Ptolemy I, one of his generals, who established the Ptolemaic dynasty that would rule Egypt for the next 3 centuries. The Ptolemaic period. Greek rule. The Ptolemaic period represents the final chapter of ancient Egyptian civilization. For 300 years, Greek pharaohs ruled Egypt, creating a unique blend of Egyptian and Hellenistic culture while maintaining the ancient traditions that defined Egyptian civilization. Ptolemy I established his capital at Alexandria, which quickly became the largest and most cosmopolitan city in the Mediterranean world. The city housed the famous Library of Alexandria, which attempted to collect all human knowledge, and the Pharaoh's Lighthouse, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The Ptolemies adopted the traditional role of pharaoh, participating in Egyptian religious ceremonies and building temples throughout the country. However, they remained fundamentally Greek in culture and language, ruling Egypt as foreign overlords rather than truly Egyptian kings. The Ptolemaic court was notorious for its wealth, luxury, and intrigue. Following Egyptian tradition, the Ptolemies often married their siblings to keep the royal bloodline pure. This practice led to a complex web of family relationships and frequent civil wars over succession. Despite political instability, the Ptolemaic period saw remarkable cultural achievements. The Museum of Alexandria became the greatest center of learning in the ancient world, attracting scholars, scientists, and philosophers from throughout the Mediterranean. Eratosthenes calculated the circumference of the earth, Euclid developed the foundations of geometry, and Archimedes made revolutionary discoveries in physics and mathematics. The Ptolemies were great builders, constructing magnificent temples throughout Egypt. The temple complex at Edfu, dedicated to the god Horus, is one of the best preserved ancient Egyptian temples and provides invaluable insights into Egyptian religious practices. However, the Ptolemaic kingdom gradually weakened over the centuries. Repeated civil wars, economic problems, and the growing power of Rome all contributed to the dynasty's decline. The latter Ptolemies became increasingly dependent on Roman support to maintain their throne. Cleopatra VII, the last pharaoh of Egypt, was one of the most famous women in history. Contrary to popular belief, she was not Egyptian but descended from Ptolemy I, one of Alexander's Greek generals. However, she was the first Ptolemaic ruler to learn the Egyptian language and participate fully in Egyptian religious traditions. Cleopatra became pharaoh at age 18, co-ruling with her younger brother Ptolemy XIII, according to their father's will. However, civil war soon broke out between the siblings, forcing Cleopatra to flee Egypt and seek support from Rome. Julius Caesar's arrival in Alexandria in 48 BCE changed everything. Cleopatra famously smuggled herself into his presence, wrapped in a carpet, and became his lover and ally. With Roman support, she defeated her brother and became sole ruler of Egypt. Cleopatra's relationship with Caesar was both romantic and political. She bore him a son, Caesarion, and lived in Rome as Caesar's mistress. Her presence in Rome shocked Roman society and contributed to the political opposition that eventually led to Caesar's assassination in 44 BCE. After Caesar's death, Cleopatra aligned herself with Mark Antony, one of the 3 rulers of the Roman world. Their relationship was passionate and political, producing 3 children and creating a powerful alliance that threatened to divide the Roman Empire. However, Octavian, later Augustus, Caesar's heir and Antony's rival, declared war on Cleopatra and Antony. The decisive battle came at Actium in 31 BCE, where Octavian's fleet defeated the combined forces of Egypt and Antony. Cleopatra and Antony fled to Alexandria, but their situation was hopeless. When Octavian invaded Egypt in 30 BCE, both Cleopatra and Antony committed suicide rather than face capture and humiliation in Rome. With Cleopatra's death, ancient Egyptian civilization came to an end. After more than 3,000 years, Egypt became a Roman province, and while Egyptian culture and religion persisted for several more centuries, the age of the pharaohs was over forever. Legacy of ancient Egypt. Ancient Egypt's legacy extends far beyond its famous monuments and treasures. Egyptian civilization made fundamental contributions to human knowledge and culture that continue to influence our world today. In mathematics, the Egyptians developed decimal notation, sophisticated geometry, and practical engineering techniques that enabled the construction of the pyramids. Their medical knowledge was advanced for its time, with Edwin Smith papyrus containing surgical procedures that remained valid for thousands of years. Egyptian writing, in the form of hieroglyphs, hieratic and demotic scripts, preserved one of the world's oldest literatures. Egyptian stories, wisdom texts, and religious writings provide insights into human nature and spirituality that remain relevant today. The Egyptian concept of ma'at, truth, justice, and cosmic order, influenced legal and ethical thinking throughout the ancient world. Their beliefs about the afterlife shaped Mediterranean religions and eventually influenced early Christianity. Egyptian art and architecture established aesthetic principles that influenced Greek and Roman art, which in turn shaped Western artistic traditions. The Egyptian emphasis on permanence and monumentality continues to inspire architects and artists today. Perhaps most importantly, ancient Egypt demonstrated that human civilization could endure for millennia through adaptation, innovation, and respect for tradition. The pharaohs who built the pyramids and the scribes who recorded their deeds created something that transcended their individual lives, a civilization that continues to captivate and inspire us more than 2,000 years after its end. As we close this journey through ancient Egypt's long history, from the unification under Narmer to Cleopatra's final breath, we can appreciate the remarkable achievement of this civilization that flourished along the Nile for over 3,000 years. In the quiet darkness of night, as the stars wheel overhead, just as they did for the ancient Egyptians, we can reflect on the enduring human desire to create something lasting, something beautiful, something that connects us to the eternal rhythms of earth and sky that guided the pharaohs in their earthly reign and their journey to the stars. Daily life in ancient Egypt, the world of the living. To truly understand ancient Egypt, we must look beyond the pharaohs and monuments to explore how ordinary people lived, worked, and worshipped along the Nile. Egyptian society was highly stratified, yet it offered opportunities for advancement that were rare in the ancient world. At the top of society stood the pharaoh, considered a living god on earth. Below him were the nobles and high priests, who administered the kingdom and performed the religious ceremonies that maintained cosmic order. These elite families lived in magnificent houses with gardens, pools, and elaborate decorations. The scribes formed the backbone of Egyptian administration. Writing was the key to advancement in Egyptian society, and those who mastered hieroglyphs could rise from humble origins to positions of great influence. Scribal schools attached to temples and government offices trained young men in reading, writing, mathematics, and law. Most Egyptians were farmers who worked the fertile fields along the Nile. The annual flood cycle determined the rhythm of their lives. During the flood season, when the fields were underwater, farmers worked on royal building projects or crafts. When the waters receded, they planted crops in the rich mud left behind. The harvest season was a time of celebration and thanksgiving to the gods. Egyptian houses varied greatly depending on social status. Peasant farmers lived in simple mud brick structures with 1 or 2 rooms. Wealthy nobles enjoyed spacious villas with multiple stories, courtyards, and specialized rooms for different activities. All Egyptian houses were built to stay cool in the desert heat, with thick walls and small windows. The Egyptian diet depended heavily on bread and beer, both made from grains grown in the Nile Valley. The wealthy enjoyed meat, fish, fruits, and vegetables, while commoners supplemented their grain-based diet with fish from the Nile and whatever vegetables they could grow in small gardens. Egyptian clothing was made primarily from linen, woven from flax plants grown in the delta. The wealthy wore fine pleated garments dyed in bright colors, while commoners made do with simple white tunics. Jewelry was extremely popular among all social classes, with elaborate pieces made from gold, silver, and precious stones for the wealthy and simple ornaments of copper and faience for the poor. Egyptian women enjoyed more rights and freedoms than women in most ancient cultures. They could own property, conduct business, and even rule as pharaohs in exceptional circumstances. Marriage was based on mutual consent, and divorce was possible if the couple could no longer live together harmoniously. Education was primarily reserved for boys from wealthy families. Though some girls from elite families received instruction in reading and writing, most children learned their parents' trades through apprenticeship, beginning work at an early age to contribute to their family's survival. The Egyptians were skilled craftsmen who produced beautiful objects from wood, stone, metal, and glass. Carpenters created elegant furniture and boats. Stonemasons carved statues and relief decorations for temples and tombs. Metalworkers fashioned tools, weapons, and jewelry. Glassmakers produced colorful vessels and ornaments that were highly prized throughout the ancient world. Trade was essential to Egyptian prosperity. Merchants traveled throughout the Mediterranean and into Africa and Asia, exchanging Egyptian grain, linen, and manufactured goods for timber, metals, spices, and exotic animals. The pharaohs controlled the most profitable trade routes and used their monopoly over certain goods to fund their building projects and military campaigns. Medicine in ancient Egypt was surprisingly advanced. Egyptian doctors understood anatomy from their experience with mummification and could perform complex surgical procedures. They had remedies for many ailments and understood the importance of cleanliness in preventing disease. Medical papyri described treatments for everything from broken bones to eye diseases. Music and entertainment played important roles in Egyptian life. Musicians performed at religious ceremonies, royal banquets, and popular festivals. Dancers, acrobats, and storytellers provided entertainment for all social classes. Board games like Senet were popular pastimes, and even serious-minded Egyptians enjoyed parties and celebrations. Egyptian religion, the sacred and the divine. Egyptian religion was one of the most complex and enduring belief systems in human history. For over 3,000 years, the Egyptians worshipped hundreds of gods and goddesses, each with specific roles in maintaining the cosmic order that governed both earth and sky. At the heart of Egyptian religion was the concept of Ma'at, usually translated as truth, justice, or cosmic order. Ma'at was both a goddess and an abstract principle that governed the universe. The pharaoh's primary duty was to maintain Ma'at by ensuring justice in human affairs and proper relationships between mortals and gods. The Egyptian pantheon included gods of every aspect of life and nature. Ra, the sun god, was the most important deity, traveling across the sky each day in his solar bark and through the underworld each night. Ptah was the creator god who spoke the world into existence. Thoth, depicted as an ibis or baboon, was the god of wisdom and writing. Isis and Osiris were central to Egyptian beliefs about death and the afterlife. According to myth, Osiris was a good king who was murdered by his jealous brother Set. Isis, Osiris's wife, used her magical powers to resurrect him long enough to conceive their son Horus. Osiris became king of the underworld, while Horus avenged his father and became the divine prototype for earthly pharaohs. Egyptian temples were not places of congregation like modern churches, but houses for the gods, where priests performed daily rituals to maintain cosmic order. Each temple contained a sanctuary where the god's statue resided, surrounded by courtyards and halls decorated with scenes of the pharaoh worshipping the deities. The daily temple ritual was complex and precise. Each morning, the high priest would wake the god by opening the doors of the sanctuary, wash and dress the statue, and offer food, drink, and incense. These ceremonies were believed to sustain the gods and ensure their continued protection of Egypt. Religious festivals provided opportunities for ordinary Egyptians to participate in worship and celebrate their gods. During these festivals, the gods' statues were carried in processions through the streets, allowing people to present petitions and receive oracles. The Opet festival at Thebes, celebrating the marriage of Amun and Mut, was one of the most elaborate religious celebrations in the ancient world. Magic was an integral part of Egyptian religion, not separate from it. The Egyptians believed that knowing the true names of gods and demons gave power over them. Magical spells were used for protection, healing, and success in various endeavors. Amulets bearing protective symbols were worn by living and dead alike. The afterlife was central to Egyptian religious thought. The Egyptians believed that death was not an ending, but a transformation to another form of existence. However, reaching the afterlife safely required careful preparation, proper burial, and knowledge of the spells and passwords needed to navigate the dangers of the underworld. The process of mummification developed from the Egyptian belief that the physical body was necessary for existence in the afterlife. The elaborate procedures involved in preserving the body reflected both religious beliefs and practical knowledge of anatomy. The process could take up to 70 days and involved removing the organs, drying the body with natron salt, and wrapping it in linen bandages. Tomb decoration served both artistic and religious functions. The scenes painted on tomb walls were believed to come alive in the afterlife, providing the deceased with everything needed for eternal happiness. These paintings are our best source of information about daily life in ancient Egypt, showing farming, crafts, hunting, and domestic activities in vivid detail. The Book of the Dead, properly called the Book of Coming Forth by Day, contained spells and instructions for navigating the afterlife. Different versions existed for people of different social classes, with the wealthy able to afford elaborate papyrus scrolls, while commoners made do with abbreviated versions written on cheaper materials. The Judgment of the Dead was a crucial moment in the afterlife journey. According to Egyptian belief, the deceased's heart was weighed against the feather of Ma'at in the presence of Osiris and 42 divine judges. If the heart was lighter than the feather, the person was worthy of eternal life. If heavier, it was devoured by Ammit, the soul eater, resulting in final death. Egyptian religious beliefs evolved over the millennia, incorporating new gods and adapting to changing circumstances. Local deities were promoted to national importance when their cities became politically powerful. Foreign gods were incorporated into the Egyptian pantheon when they served useful functions or when political alliances made such adoption advisable. Art and architecture, creating for eternity. Egyptian art and architecture were created not merely for aesthetic pleasure, but to serve specific religious and political functions. Every artistic work had a purpose, whether to honor the gods, commemorate the pharaoh's deeds, or ensure the deceased's successful journey to the afterlife. Egyptian artistic style was remarkably consistent over 3 millennia, following strict conventions that governed how gods, pharaohs, and ordinary people should be depicted. This consistency reflected the Egyptian belief in the eternal nature of truth and order. Change was seen as potentially dangerous, as it might disrupt the cosmic harmony that art was meant to preserve and reflect. The canonical proportions used in Egyptian art were based on a grid system that ensured proper relationships between different parts of the human body. Figures were typically shown in composite view, with heads in profile but eyes facing forward, torsos from the front, and legs in profile. This approach was not due to artistic inability, but to religious necessity. Every part of the body had to be clearly visible to ensure its continued existence in the afterlife. Egyptian sculpture ranged from colossal monuments to tiny amulets, but all followed similar principles. Statues were created to house the ka, or soul, of the person depicted. They had to be recognizable portraits to serve this function, yet they also had to conform to idealized standards of beauty and perfection appropriate to their eternal purpose. The Great Sphinx of Giza, carved from a single massive limestone outcrop, represents the pinnacle of Egyptian sculptural achievement. This monument, with its human head and lion's body, embodied the pharaoh's divine nature and his role as protector of Egypt. Despite centuries of erosion and human damage, it remains one of the most recognizable symbols of ancient Egypt. Egyptian architecture was designed for permanence, using massive stone blocks and simple but effective construction techniques. The post and lintel system, where horizontal beams rest on vertical supports, was used throughout Egyptian history because of its stability and the sense of eternal strength it conveyed. Temple architecture followed established patterns that reflected Egyptian cosmology. The temple represented the primordial mound from which creation began, surrounded by the waters of chaos. Visitors entered through massive pylons, representing the horizon, passed through courtyards symbolizing the earth, and approached the sanctuary, representing the heavens where the god resided. The hypostyle hall at Karnak, with its forest of massive columns supporting a stone roof, demonstrates the Egyptians' mastery of large-scale architecture. The hall covers 54,000 square feet, and its central columns rise 80 feet high, creating a space that inspires awe and reverence in all who enter. Egyptian painting reached its highest development in tomb decoration, where artists created vivid scenes of daily life, religious ceremonies, and mythological events. These paintings served multiple purposes. They decorated the tomb, provided magical protection for the deceased, and ensured that the depicted activities would continue in the afterlife. The painter's palette was limited but effective. Red and yellow ochre, black charcoal, blue and green from ground minerals, and white chalk were the primary colors. Artists mixed these pigments with water and binders to create paints that have retained their brilliance for thousands of years. Hieroglyphic writing was itself an art form, with scribes taking pride in the beauty of their calligraphy. The most skilled scribes could create texts that were both readable and decorative, incorporating pictures and symbols into harmonious compositions that served both practical and aesthetic functions. The decorative arts flourished in ancient Egypt, with craftsmen creating beautiful objects from every available material. Gold and silver jewelry displayed incredible technical skill and artistic sensitivity. Furniture makers created elegant chairs, beds, and chests, decorated with intricate inlays and carvings. Even everyday objects like pottery and baskets were often decorated with pleasing patterns and designs. Egyptian artistic influence spread throughout the ancient world through trade and cultural contact. Greek artists learned Egyptian techniques and adapted them to their own artistic traditions. Roman collectors prized Egyptian art objects, and many were transported to Italy, where they influenced Roman artistic development. The rediscovery of Egyptian art in the modern era has had profound effects on Western culture. The clean lines, geometric patterns, and bold colors of Egyptian design influenced Art Deco architecture and design in the early 20th century. Egyptian motifs continue to appear in contemporary art and popular culture, testament to the enduring appeal of this ancient aesthetic. The pyramids, monuments to eternity. The pyramids of Egypt represent humanity's first attempt to build for eternity. These massive structures, rising from the desert sands west of the Nile, embody the Egyptian belief in the afterlife and the divine nature of pharaonic power. They remain among the most impressive architectural achievements in human history. The Step Pyramid of Djoser at Saqqara, built around 2650, was the world's first monumental stone building. Designed by the architect Imhotep, it began as a traditional mastaba tomb, but was expanded upward in 6 distinct steps, reaching a height of 200 feet. This revolutionary design established the pyramid as the ideal form for royal burial. The evolution from step pyramid to true pyramid occurred during the 4th dynasty. The bent pyramid at Dashur shows this transition clearly. Its builders began with a steep angle, but changed to a gentler slope partway up, creating its distinctive bent appearance. This change may have been due to structural concerns or the pharaoh's desire to complete the pyramid quickly. The Great Pyramid of Khufu at Giza represents the pinnacle of pyramid building. Originally standing 481 feet tall and covering 13 acres at its base, it was constructed from approximately 2.3 million stone blocks, each averaging 2.5 tons in weight. The precision of its construction is remarkable. The base is level to within just 2.1 centimeters. Building the Great Pyramid required extraordinary organization and resources. Estimates suggest that 20,000 to 30,000 workers labored for 2 decades to complete the monument. These workers included skilled stonemasons, engineers, and architects, as well as thousands of laborers who quarried, transported, and positioned the massive blocks. Recent archaeological discoveries have revealed much about the pyramid builders' lives. They lived in purpose-built towns near the construction sites, with bakeries, breweries, and medical facilities. Analysis of their remains shows they were well-fed and received medical care, contradicting the popular image of pyramid construction as slave labor. The internal structure of the Great Pyramid is as impressive as its external appearance. 3 chambers connected by passages and shafts demonstrate the builder's sophisticated understanding of engineering and astronomy. The Grand Gallery, ascending toward the King's Chamber, is a masterpiece of precision stonework that has never been equaled. The pyramid complexes were not isolated monuments, but parts of elaborate religious installations. Each pyramid had an associated mortuary temple, where priests performed daily rituals for the dead pharaoh's spirit. Causeways connected these temples to valley temples near the Nile, where the pharaoh's funeral procession began its final journey to the pyramid. The Sphinx, carved from bedrock near Khafre's pyramid, served as guardian of the Giza necropolis. This colossal sculpture, combining human intelligence with leonine strength, embodied the pharaoh's divine nature and his role as protector of Egypt. Despite centuries of sand burial and erosion, it remains one of the world's most recognizable monuments. The Pyramid Texts, first appearing in the Pyramid of Unas at the end of the 5th dynasty, provide our earliest detailed insights into Egyptian beliefs about the afterlife. These carved inscriptions contain spells and prayers designed to ensure the pharaoh's successful transformation into a divine being and his journey to join the gods in the sky. Later pyramids, built during the Middle Kingdom, were smaller and less well constructed than their Old Kingdom predecessors, but incorporated important innovations. Internal passages became more complex, with false chambers and hidden entrances designed to confuse tomb robbers. The pyramid texts evolved into coffin texts and eventually into the Book of the Dead. The decline of pyramid building during the New Kingdom reflected changing religious beliefs and practical considerations. Pharaohs began choosing burial in hidden rock-cut tombs in the Valley of the Kings, hoping that secrecy would provide better protection than monumental architecture. However, the pyramid remained a potent symbol of pharaonic power throughout Egyptian history. The Nubian pharaohs of the 25th dynasty revived pyramid building, constructing steep-sided pyramids at Nuri and other sites in Sudan. These pyramids, though smaller than their Egyptian predecessors, demonstrated the continuing power of pyramid symbolism and the Nubian rulers' claims to be legitimate pharaohs of Egypt. Modern investigations of the pyramids continue to reveal new secrets. Remote sensing technologies have detected hidden chambers within the Great Pyramid, while computer models have tested theories about construction methods. Each new discovery adds to our understanding of these monuments and the civilization that created them. Writing and literature, preserving wisdom for eternity. The development of writing in ancient Egypt was one of humanity's most significant achievements. Egyptian scribes created 3 distinct scripts, hieroglyphic, hieratic, and demotic, that preserved religious texts, literary works, historical records, and administrative documents for over 3 millennia. Hieroglyphic writing, the most famous Egyptian script, began as a system of picture writing around 3200 BCE. Early hieroglyphs were simple pictures representing the objects they depicted. A bird meant bird, a house meant house. Over time, the system became more sophisticated, with symbols representing sounds as well as objects and ideas. The hieroglyphic system contained over 700 different signs, making it one of the most complex writing systems ever developed. Scribes had to memorize not only the basic symbols, but also their various meanings and uses in different contexts. Mastering hieroglyphic writing required years of intensive study and practice. Hieratic script developed as a cursive form of hieroglyphic writing, allowing scribes to write more quickly on papyrus and other materials. Used primarily for administrative and religious documents, hieratic writing was the workhorse of Egyptian literacy, handling the daily business of government, religion, and commerce. Demotic script, appearing in the 7th century BCE, represented a further simplification of Egyptian writing, used for legal documents, business records, and popular literature. Demotic was the most widely used form of Egyptian writing during the late period and Ptolemaic era. The Rosetta Stone, discovered in 1799, contained the same text in hieroglyphic, demotic, and Greek scripts. This trilingual inscription provided the key that allowed Jean-François Champollion to decipher hieroglyphic writing in 1822, opening ancient Egyptian civilization to modern study. Egyptian literature encompassed many genres, from religious texts to popular stories. The pyramid texts, coffin texts, and Book of the Dead formed a continuous tradition of religious literature spanning over 2 millennia. These texts provided the deceased with the knowledge and magical spells needed to navigate the afterlife successfully. Wisdom literature was another important genre, containing practical advice for living a good life and achieving success in Egyptian society. The instructions of Ptah advised readers on proper behavior, respect for authority, and the importance of listening before speaking. These texts reveal Egyptian values and provide insights into ancient ethics and morality. Egyptian storytelling reached its peak during the Middle Kingdom, with tales like the story of Sinuhe. This masterpiece tells of an Egyptian official who flees to foreign lands after a political crisis, only to long for his homeland. The story explores themes of identity, loyalty, and the meaning of home that remain relevant today. Love poetry from the New Kingdom shows a more intimate side of Egyptian culture. These poems, often written from both male and female perspectives, express the joys and sorrows of romantic love in language that is both beautiful and deeply human. They reveal that despite the formal nature of much Egyptian art and literature, real emotions and personal experiences were valued and preserved. Historical texts provide crucial information about Egyptian kings and their achievements. Royal inscriptions on temple walls and stelae record military campaigns, building projects, and religious activities. Annals like those of Thutmose III provide detailed accounts of specific events and their historical significance. Medical papyri demonstrate the practical applications of Egyptian writing. The Edwin Smith Papyrus contains surgical procedures and anatomical observations that remain scientifically valid for centuries. The Ebers Papyrus describes treatments for various diseases and reveals the Egyptians' understanding of medicine and pharmacology. Mathematical papyri show Egyptian achievements in mathematics and engineering. The Rind Papyrus contains problems involving fractions, area calculation, and geometric principles used in construction projects. These texts reveal the practical mathematical knowledge that made possible the construction of pyramids and temples. Administrative documents provide insights into the daily workings of Egyptian government and society. Tax records, legal contracts, and correspondence reveal how the ancient Egyptian state functioned and how ordinary people lived their lives. These mundane documents are often more revealing than grand royal inscriptions. The preservation of Egyptian texts depended largely on climate and burial conditions. The dry climate of Egypt preserved papyri that would have disintegrated in wetter environments. Texts buried in tombs or sealed in jars survived better than those exposed to air and light. Many important texts exist in only fragmentary form, making their interpretation challenging. Egyptian literary influence extended throughout the ancient world. Biblical stories show Egyptian influence, and Greek authors like Herodotus drew on Egyptian sources for their histories. The wisdom literature traditions of Egypt influenced Jewish, Christian, and Islamic thought, spreading Egyptian ideas far beyond the Nile Valley. The Nile, lifeblood of civilization. The Nile River was the foundation upon which Egyptian civilization was built. This great waterway, flowing northward for over 4,000 miles from the highlands of Africa to the Mediterranean Sea, created the narrow ribbon of fertile land that supported one of humanity's greatest civilizations. The ancient Egyptians called their river simply the river, because to them no other waterway deserved the name. The Nile was the source of all life, the highway that connected their kingdom, and the divine manifestation of their God's benevolence. Understanding the Nile is essential to understanding Egypt itself. The river's annual flood cycle determined the rhythm of Egyptian life. Each summer, monsoon rains in the Ethiopian highlands caused the Blue Nile to surge, carrying rich sediment northward to Egypt. The floodwaters, arriving in Egypt around July, covered the fields with life-giving silt before receding in October to reveal renewed farmland. This predictable cycle allowed Egyptian farmers to plan their agricultural activities with remarkable precision. They developed a calendar based on the flood's arrival, dividing the year into 3 seasons: Akhet, flood; Peret, growing; and Shemu, harvest. This agricultural calendar became the foundation of Egyptian timekeeping and religious observances. The Egyptians developed sophisticated irrigation systems to maximize the flood's benefits. They built canals to direct water to distant fields, constructed basins to store floodwater, and created shadoofs and other devices to lift water from the river to higher ground. These technologies allowed them to cultivate areas that would otherwise have remained desert. The Nile served as Egypt's primary highway, connecting communities from the first cataract at Aswan to the Mediterranean coast. Boats carried grain, stone, people, and ideas up and down the river, creating cultural unity despite Egypt's great length. The prevailing north wind allowed boats to sail upstream while the current carried them downstream. Different types of vessels plied the Nile's waters. Simple papyrus rafts served for local fishing and transport. Elegant wooden boats carried nobles and officials on business and pleasure trips. Massive barges transported the stone blocks used in pyramid and temple construction. Royal ships accompanied pharaohs on ceremonial journeys and military campaigns. The river's predictability made it a symbol of cosmic order in Egyptian religion. The sun god Ra was imagined sailing across the sky in a solar bark similar to those used on the Nile. The deceased pharaoh was thought to join Ra in this eternal journey, traveling through the underworld each night and rising with the sun each morning. Hapi, the god of the Nile flood, was one of the most important deities in the Egyptian pantheon, depicted as a blue or green-skinned man with female breasts, symbolizing the river's life-giving properties. Hapi was honored with festivals and prayers during the flood season. The pharaoh's ability to ensure good floods was seen as proof of his divine favor. The Nile's resources supported not only agriculture, but also crafts and trade. Papyrus reeds growing in the delta marshes were harvested to make writing material that was exported throughout the ancient world. Fish from the river provided protein for all social classes. Waterfowl from the marshes were hunted for food and sport. The river also provided Egypt with natural defenses. The cataracts south of Aswan made navigation difficult, protecting Egypt from southern invasion. The delta marshes in the north could be flooded to hinder northern attackers. These natural barriers, combined with the surrounding deserts, gave Egypt security that lasted for millennia. Control of the Nile meant control of Egypt. Pharaohs, who could maintain the irrigation systems and keep the river traffic flowing, prospered. Those who lost control of the river lost their kingdoms. The central government's authority was often measured by its ability to coordinate activities along the entire length of the river. Climate changes occasionally disrupted the flood cycle, with devastating consequences for Egyptian civilization. Series of low floods caused famines that weakened dynasties and contributed to political collapse. The first intermediate period was associated with such climate problems, showing how dependent Egyptian civilization was on the river's reliability. The Nile's influence extended beyond Egypt's borders. Nubian civilizations developed along the river's upper reaches, creating kingdoms that sometimes rivaled Egypt itself. The river served as a conduit for African goods reaching the Mediterranean world, and for Egyptian cultural influence spreading into Africa. Modern dams and irrigation projects have fundamentally altered the Nile's character. The annual flood that sustained Egyptian civilization for millennia has been replaced by controlled water release from the Aswan High Dam. While this provides year-round irrigation and flood control, it has also disrupted ecological systems that evolved over thousands of years. Mysteries and discoveries, secrets of the sands. Despite centuries of study, ancient Egypt continues to yield new secrets and raise fascinating questions that capture the imagination of scholars and the public alike. Each archaeological discovery adds new pieces to the puzzle of this remarkable civilization, while some mysteries may never be fully solved. The construction of the pyramids remains one of history's greatest engineering puzzles. While we know they were built by skilled workers using ramps, levers, and organizational genius, the exact methods remain debated. Recent discoveries of ramp systems and worker villages have provided new insights, but the complete picture of how these monuments were created continues to emerge slowly from the sands. The identity of Queen Nefertiti, wife of the revolutionary pharaoh Akhenaten, remains tantalizingly elusive. Her famous bust, discovered in 1912, made her one of the most recognizable faces from ancient Egypt, yet her ultimate fate is unknown. Some scholars believe she ruled briefly as pharaoh under another name, while others suggest she fell from favor and disappeared from history. The tomb of Tutankhamun, discovered intact by Howard Carter in 1922, revolutionized our understanding of royal burial practices. However, the young pharaoh's death remains mysterious. Recent scientific studies suggest he may have died from complications following a chariot accident, though other theories propose disease or even murder. The truth may never be known with certainty. Lost cities continue to emerge from Egypt's sands. The discovery of Tanis in the 1930s revealed a royal necropolis that rivaled the Valley of the Kings. More recently, underwater archaeology in Alexandria's harbor has uncovered parts of the ancient city, including possible remains of the legendary library and Pharaoh's lighthouse. The search for Cleopatra's tomb has captivated archaeologists for generations. Despite numerous expeditions and claimed discoveries, the last pharaoh's final resting place remains unknown. Some believe it lies beneath modern Alexandria, while others search in more remote locations, where the queen might have been buried in secret. Hidden chambers within existing monuments continue to be discovered using modern technology. Ground-penetrating radar and cosmic ray detection have revealed previously unknown spaces within the Great Pyramid, raising hopes of new discoveries. Each new chamber detected brings fresh excitement and speculation about what treasures or knowledge it might contain. The decipherment of hieroglyphs opened Egyptian civilization to modern study, but many texts remain partially understood. Religious and magical texts often contain obscure references and symbolic language that challenges even expert translators. Each new text discovered adds to our vocabulary and understanding of ancient Egyptian thought. Ancient Egyptian medical knowledge was remarkably advanced for its time, yet many of their treatments remain mysterious. The Edwin Smith Papyrus describes surgical procedures with precision that would be acceptable today, while other medical texts prescribe treatments that seem more magical than medical. Understanding the relationship between Egyptian medicine and magic continues to challenge scholars. The process of mummification, while generally understood, still holds secrets. Recent studies of mummies using CT scans and other non-invasive techniques continue to reveal new information about ancient diseases, diet, and lifestyle. Some mummification techniques appear to have been more sophisticated than previously believed, while others remain puzzling to modern science. Climate change in ancient times affected Egyptian civilization in ways we are still discovering. Ice core data and other climate indicators show periods of drought and plenty that correlate with Egyptian political changes. Understanding these connections helps explain the rise and fall of dynasties and the development of Egyptian religious beliefs. The extent of ancient Egyptian influence on other civilizations continues to be debated. Evidence of Egyptian contact with distant lands appears in archaeological sites from Greece to Africa to Asia. Trade networks, cultural exchange, and Egyptian colonies may have spread Egyptian ideas and practices far beyond the Nile Valley. Recent discoveries in Sudan have revealed the wealth and sophistication of Nubian kingdoms that were Egypt's neighbors and sometimes conquerors. These finds are changing our understanding of ancient Africa and showing that Egyptian civilization was part of a larger African cultural complex rather than an isolated phenomenon. The role of women in ancient Egypt was more significant than in most ancient civilizations, yet much about their lives remains to be discovered. Female pharaohs like Hatshepsut and Cleopatra are well known, but the lives of ordinary women are documented mainly through tomb paintings and legal texts. Archaeological discoveries continue to reveal more about women's roles in Egyptian society. Ancient Egyptian astronomy and mathematics were highly developed, yet we are still discovering the extent of their knowledge. Recent studies of temple alignments and ceiling decorations reveal sophisticated understanding of astronomical phenomena. The Egyptians' mathematical abilities, demonstrated in pyramid construction and administrative records, continue to impress modern scholars. Roman Egypt: transformation and continuity. When Augustus Caesar conquered Egypt in 30 BCE, he did not merely add another province to the Roman Empire. Egypt became Rome's private estate, too valuable and strategically important to be governed like other territories. The transformation of Egypt from independent kingdom to Roman province marked the end of pharaonic civilization, yet Egyptian culture proved remarkably resilient under foreign rule. Augustus recognized Egypt's unique character and established special administrative arrangements. The country was governed by a prefect appointed directly by the emperor, rather than by senators as in other provinces. Romans were generally prohibited from entering Egypt without imperial permission, and Egyptians were forbidden to serve in the Roman legions, though they could join auxiliary units. The Romans found Egypt enormously profitable. The province supplied approximately 1/3 of Rome's grain requirements, making it essential to feeding the empire's population. Egyptian wealth, accumulated over millennia, filled Roman treasuries and funded imperial building projects throughout the Mediterranean world. Egyptian religion initially flourished under Roman rule. The Romans were generally tolerant of local beliefs and even adopted some Egyptian deities. Isis became popular throughout the Roman world, with temples dedicated to her appearing from Britain to the Euphrates. The mystery religions that originated in Egypt influenced Roman spiritual life for centuries. Alexandria remained one of the empire's greatest cities under Roman rule. The museum and library continued to function, though they never again achieved their Ptolemaic glory. The city's commercial importance grew as it became the hub of trade between the Roman Empire and India, handling luxury goods that flowed through the Red Sea ports. Roman engineering transformed parts of Egypt while preserving others. New roads and harbors improved transportation and trade. Roman baths, theaters, and other public buildings appeared in major cities. However, the Romans also maintained Egyptian temples and even built new ones in traditional Egyptian style, showing respect for local religious traditions. The population of Roman Egypt was remarkably diverse. Native Egyptians formed the majority, but Greeks remained influential in the cities. Jewish communities flourished, particularly in Alexandria. Romans, though numerically small, controlled the government and military. This multicultural society created a unique blend of traditions and practices. Egyptian art adapted to Roman tastes while maintaining its distinctive character. Portrait painting, particularly mummy portraits from the Fayum region, show a fusion of Egyptian and Greco-Roman styles. These realistic paintings, attached to mummies, provide haunting glimpses of individuals who lived in Roman Egypt 18 centuries ago. The introduction of Christianity to Egypt occurred during the Roman period and eventually transformed Egyptian civilization more profoundly than the Roman conquest itself. According to tradition, Saint Mark brought Christianity to Alexandria in the 1st century CE. The new religion spread rapidly, particularly among the Egyptian-speaking population. Early Christian art in Egypt blended Christian symbolism with traditional Egyptian motifs. Coptic art, as it came to be known, used familiar Egyptian symbols like the ankh and lotus to represent Christian concepts. This artistic fusion showed how deeply rooted Egyptian traditions were in the popular consciousness. The persecution of Christians under emperors like Diocletian was particularly severe in Egypt. Many Egyptians died for their faith, and their martyrdom stories became central to Egyptian Christian identity. The Coptic calendar still numbers years from the beginning of Diocletian's reign, called the Era of Martyrs. Constantine's conversion to Christianity in the early 4th century changed Egypt's religious landscape dramatically. Christianity became first tolerated and then dominant, while traditional Egyptian religion gradually declined. Ancient temples were converted to churches or abandoned, ending religious traditions that had endured for millennia. The rise of monasticism began in Egypt with Saint Anthony and spread throughout the Christian world. Egyptian deserts that had once been home to hermit priests of ancient gods became populated with Christian monks seeking spiritual perfection through prayer and asceticism. Coptic monasteries preserved ancient learning through the Dark Ages. The Council of Chalcedon in 451 CE created a schism between Egyptian Christianity and the rest of the Christian world. The Egyptians rejected the council's decisions about the nature of Christ, leading to their separation from the Byzantine Church. This religious independence paralleled growing cultural and political separatism in Egypt. The Byzantine Empire's heavy taxation and religious persecution of the Coptic Church created resentment among Egyptians. When Persian armies conquered Egypt in 619 CE, many Egyptians welcomed them as liberators from Byzantine oppression. Though Byzantine rule was restored in 629 CE, the damage to imperial authority was irreversible. The Arab Conquest and Islamic Egypt. The Arab conquest of Egypt in 641 CE marked the final transformation of ancient Egyptian civilization. Led by Amr ibn al-Asi, the Arab armies faced little resistance from a population exhausted by decades of Persian and Byzantine warfare. This conquest would bring Egypt into the Islamic world and gradually transform its culture and identity. The Arab conquest was facilitated by Egyptian dissatisfaction with Byzantine rule. Heavy taxation, religious persecution of Coptic Christians, and administrative corruption had alienated the population. Many Egyptians saw the Arabs as potential liberators rather than conquerors, and some Coptic leaders actively assisted the Muslim armies. Amr ibn al-As established his headquarters at Babylon, the old Roman fortress at the head of the Nile Delta. Near this site, he founded a new city called Fustat, which would grow to become one of the Islamic world's greatest urban centers. This marked the beginning of Islamic Egypt and the gradual eclipse of Alexandria's importance. The early Islamic administration showed remarkable tolerance toward Egypt's Christian majority. The Copts were recognized as people of the book and granted protection in exchange for payment of a special tax called jizya. Many administrative positions remained in Christian hands, as the Arabs lacked the bureaucratic experience needed to govern such a complex society. The gradual conversion of Egypt to Islam took place over several centuries. Economic incentives, intermarriage, and social pressures encouraged conversion, while the simplified monotheism of Islam appealed to many who had been confused by complex Christian theological disputes. By the 10th century, Muslims formed a majority of Egypt's population. The Arabic language gradually replaced Greek and Coptic as Egypt's primary tongue. This linguistic transformation was perhaps more profound than religious conversion, as it connected Egypt to the broader Arab and Islamic world while severing links to its ancient past. The last hieroglyphic inscription was carved in 394 CE, and knowledge of ancient Egyptian writing died out completely. Under the Umayyad and Abbasid caliphates, Egypt became a valuable province, providing revenue and grain to the Islamic Empire. Egyptian craftsmen and scholars contributed to Islamic civilization, while Egypt's strategic location made it crucial to trade routes connecting Europe, Asia, and Africa. The Fatimid dynasty, claiming descent from the Prophet Muhammad's daughter Fatima, conquered Egypt in 969 CE and made it the center of their empire. They founded Cairo as their capital and established Al-Azhar University, which became one of Islam's most important centers of learning. Under Fatimid rule, Egypt experienced a cultural renaissance that attracted scholars and artists from throughout the Islamic world. The Ayyubid dynasty, established by Saladin in 1171, made Egypt the center of resistance against the Crusades. Saladin's victories against the Crusader states enhanced Egypt's prestige and demonstrated the military potential of a unified Islamic Egypt. The citadel of Cairo, built during this period, remained the seat of Egyptian government for centuries. The Mamluk period, 1250 to 1517, represented the last era of Egyptian independence before the Ottoman conquest. These warrior slaves, originally brought from Central Asia and the Caucasus, created a powerful military state that controlled Egypt and Syria. They successfully resisted Mongol invasions and expelled the last Crusader strongholds from the Levant. Mamluk Egypt was enormously wealthy, controlling the lucrative trade routes between Europe and Asia. Cairo became one of the world's largest cities, famous for its architecture, scholarship, and cosmopolitan culture. The Mamluks built magnificent mosques, madrasas, and monuments that still grace Cairo's skyline today. However, the discovery of sea routes to Asia around Africa gradually reduced Egypt's commercial importance. When the Ottomans conquered Egypt in 1517, they found a still wealthy province, but one whose golden age was ending. Egypt became an Ottoman province, governed by pashas appointed from Constantinople. The final eclipse, from ancient glory to modern memory. The transformation of Egypt from the land of the pharaohs to a province of successive empires represents one of history's most complete cultural metamorphoses. Yet even as ancient Egyptian civilization disappeared, its memory and monuments continued to fascinate those who encountered them. Medieval Arab historians preserved some knowledge of ancient Egypt, though much was lost or distorted. Writers like al-Makrizi attempted to understand the hieroglyphs and monuments they saw around them, but without the key to decipherment, ancient Egypt remained largely mysterious to its Islamic inhabitants. European travelers began visiting Egypt in increasing numbers during the Renaissance, bringing back accounts of the pyramids and temples that sparked renewed interest in ancient civilization. These early tourists laid the groundwork for the more systematic study that would develop during the Enlightenment. Napoleon's invasion of Egypt in 1798 included scholars and artists who documented Egyptian monuments with unprecedented accuracy. The Description de l'Égypte, published after the expedition's return, introduced ancient Egypt to European readers and helped launch the science of Egyptology. The discovery of the Rosetta Stone during Napoleon's expedition provided the key that Jean-François Champollion needed to decipher hieroglyphic writing in 1822. This breakthrough opened ancient Egyptian civilization to modern study and began the process of recovering Egypt's lost history. The work of early Egyptologists like Auguste Mariette, Gaston Maspero, and Flinders Petrie established scientific methods for excavating and studying Egyptian sites. Their discoveries filled museums around the world and provided the foundation for our modern understanding of ancient Egypt. The discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922 created a worldwide sensation and sparked popular fascination with ancient Egypt that continues today. Howard Carter's methodical excavation and documentation of the tomb set new standards for archaeological practice while capturing public imagination. Modern technology continues to reveal new secrets of ancient Egypt. Satellite imagery identifies buried sites. Ground-penetrating radar maps hidden chambers, and CT scans examine mummies without unwrapping them. Each technological advance provides new tools for understanding this ancient civilization. The conservation of Egyptian monuments faces unprecedented challenges in the modern world. Air pollution, groundwater changes, and mass tourism threaten sites that survived for millennia. International efforts to preserve Egypt's heritage reflect the global significance of this ancient legacy. Contemporary Egypt maintains complex relationships with its pharaonic past. While modern Egyptians take pride in their ancient heritage, the Islamic transformation of Egyptian culture created discontinuities that cannot be ignored. Ancient Egypt lives on primarily in monuments and museums rather than in living traditions. Eternal Egypt, the enduring legacy. As our journey through ancient Egypt's long history comes to an end, we can reflect on the remarkable achievement of a civilization that flourished for over 3,000 years along the banks of the Nile. From the unification under Narmer to Cleopatra's final breath, the story of ancient Egypt encompasses the full range of human experience, triumph and tragedy, wisdom and folly, the sacred and the mundane. The pharaohs who built the pyramids sought immortality through stone and gold, yet their truest immortality lies in the inspiration they continue to provide. The scribes who recorded their deeds on papyrus and stone created a legacy of knowledge that enriches our understanding of humanity's earliest attempts to create meaning, beauty, and order in the world. Ancient Egypt's contributions to human civilization extend far beyond its famous monuments. Egyptian innovations in writing, mathematics, medicine, and art laid foundations that still support our modern world. Their concept of ma'at, truth, justice, and cosmic order, remains relevant to our ongoing struggles to create fair and harmonious societies. The Egyptian understanding of time as cyclical rather than linear, reflected in their art's timeless quality and their religion's emphasis on eternal renewal, offers perspectives that complement our modern focus on progress and change. Their ability to maintain cultural continuity while adapting to new circumstances provides lessons for our rapidly changing world. The mystery and beauty of ancient Egypt continue to captivate new generations, ensuring that the pharaoh's dream of immortality has been fulfilled in ways they could never have imagined. In museums and classrooms, in books and films, in the ongoing work of archaeologists and scholars, ancient Egypt lives on. The Nile still flows northward through the desert as it did in pharaonic times, though dams now control its floods and modern cities line its banks. The pyramids still rise from the Giza Plateau, weathered by time but essentially unchanged since the 4th dynasty. The temples at Karnak and Luxor still inspire awe in those who walk through their columned halls. In the quiet hours of night, when the world grows still and the mind turns to contemplation, we can imagine ourselves sailing up the Nile with the pharaohs, watching the sun set behind the pyramids, listening to the prayers of priests in temple sanctuaries, lit by oil lamps and filled with incense. The ancient world lives on in our dreams and memories, as eternal as the stars that wheel overhead. The sands of time that buried so many civilizations could not completely cover Egypt's monuments or erase its memory. The scribes who wrote on papyrus and carved in stone succeeded in their mission to preserve their civilization's achievements for future generations. They speak to us across the millennia, reminding us that we too are part of the eternal human story. As sleep comes to close our day, we can rest with the satisfaction of having journeyed through one of humanity's greatest chapters. The wisdom of the pharaohs, the skills of the craftsmen, the faith of the priests, and the daily lives of ordinary Egyptians have been our companions on this long voyage through time. The river of history flows on, carrying us all toward unknown destinations. But the legacy of ancient Egypt remains as a lighthouse in the stream, guiding future generations toward understanding of what humans can achieve when they build not just for their own brief lives, but for eternity. In the depths of peaceful sleep, may you dream of the eternal Egypt that lives beyond time, of golden sands and sacred rivers, of monuments that touch the sky and wisdom that endures forever. The pharaohs sleep in their pyramids, the gods rest in their temples, and all is well in the eternal land beside the Nile. Sleep well, traveler through time. The journey through ancient Egypt is complete, but its memories will remain with you always, as enduring as the pyramids themselves, as eternal as the stars above the desert, as constant as the Nile that flows through the heart of civilization toward the endless sea. Thus ends our complete journey through the history of ancient Egypt, from the first pharaohs to Cleopatra's final breath, from the building of the pyramids to the Arab conquest, from the mysteries of the past to the discoveries of today. May the wisdom of ancient Egypt guide you into peaceful rest, and may your dreams be filled with the eternal wonders of the land of the pharaohs.